ADA Celebrating Independence will start in 30 minutes. ADA Celebrating Independence will start in 30 minutes. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. ADA Celebrating Independence will start in 25 minutes. ADA Celebrating Independence will start in 25 minutes. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. ADA, Celebrating Independence, will start in 20 minutes. ADA, Celebrating Independence, will start in 20 minutes. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. ADA, Celebrating Independence, will start in 15 minutes. ADA, Celebrating Independence, will start in 15 minutes. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. ADA, Celebrating Independence, will start in 10 minutes. ADA, Celebrating Independence, will start in 10 minutes. ADA, Celebrating Independence will start in 10 minutes. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate-level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender-level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. ADA, Celebrating Independence, will start in 5 minutes. ADA, Celebrating Independence will start in 5 minutes. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. Thank you to our advocate level sponsors, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, Rocky Mountain ADA Center, and Sprint Relay. Thank you to our Defender level sponsors, Denver Management Advisors, Silver Key, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Cascade Investments, UC Health, and USI. ADA, Celebrating Independence, starts now. ADA, Celebrating Independence, starts now. ADA, Celebrating Independence.
Welcome to ADA, Celebrating Independence, the Independence Center's annual event celebrating the anniversary of the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. I'm Rich Lewis, Board Chair of the Independence Center. Once again, we're hosting an annual event online this year in an effort to keep the presenters, staff, and attendees safe as the pandemic winds down. Even though most of us are watching from separate locations, we expect hundreds of people from all over the world to join us today, making this truly a global celebration. This is the Independence Center's 7th annual event, and this year we're celebrating 31 years since President George H.W. Bush signed the Americans with Disabilities Act into law on July 26, 1990. This landmark legislation established a federal mandate to eliminate discrimination against people with disabilities and helped create new paths to independence for these individuals. Our presenters today will reflect on that word, independence, what it means to each of them. Before we hear their stories, we would like to recognize our sponsors who have made this event possible. In particular, we would like to thank our sponsors who are supporting us at the advocate level: the Rocky Mountain ADA Center, Rocky Mountain Healthcare Services, and Sprint Relay. In addition, we'd like to thank other sponsors. At the Defender level, we are proud to have the ARC of the Pikes Peak region, Cascade Investments, Colorado Community Health Alliance, Denver Management Advisors, First Bank, Raymond James Associates, and UC Health. This event is also made possible by those supporting at the supporter level: Comcast, the Colorado Trust, Matthews VU Medical Group, RTA Architects, and Haynes Mechanical. We would like to acknowledge Mayor Suthers and all elected officials who are watching today as well. We truly appreciate you taking the time out to join us, and we thank you for your support. For those not familiar with the work of the Independence Center, let me give you a brief history. The Independence Center was founded as a home health agency for people with disabilities in Colorado Springs back in 1987. Over time, the Independence Center grew into the Independent Living Center, tasked with helping people with disabilities maintain their independence. Today, the IC has a home health department with over 200 employees, veterans and advocacy programs, and nearly a dozen independent living services. So the IC has seen its fair share of change over the years, but our primary mission remains the same: working with individuals, their families, and the community. We create independence so that all may thrive. Many thanks to everyone for taking time out of your busy day to celebrate the 31st anniversary of the ADA and to support the community of people with disabilities here in Colorado Springs and in the surrounding areas that the IC serves.
Hello everyone. It's my pleasure to be part of the ADA celebration again this year. Our city team strives to develop a more accessible community in many ways. I'd like to highlight a few projects. First, I'm pleased to announce the Memorial Park Beach House renovation was just completed. It was several years ago at this ADA celebration where I announced our effort to make it fully accessible. We also have plans to make Helen Hunt Falls accessible and to invest in accessible parking at the Garden of the Gods Park. Thanks in large part to voter-approved 2C road tax extension, the city added more than 1,400 curb ramps, and our Public Works Department laid nearly 500,000 square feet of accessible sidewalk. In addition to improving access to our amazing parks and facilities, our city's Office of Accessibility is working hard to improve access to our online digital information. Our bus schedules are now fully accessible to online users. Plus, more and more people are using our GoCOS app to report potential accessible parking violations, submit general ADA requests, and highlight accessibility issues in the public right-of-way. I encourage you to download the app. I also want to ask that you take part in our quarterly ADA forums to ensure our work is based on the needs of our community. Thank you so much, and enjoy the event.
Next, you'll hear from Patricia Yeager, the Chief Executive Officer of the Independence Center. In the 1980s, Patricia was an appointee of Denver's then Mayor Federico Pena, To the Commission for People with Disabilities. Patricia has a bachelor's in education from Marshall University, a master's in rehabilitation counseling from West Virginia University, and a doctorate in human rehabilitation from the University of Northern Colorado. Since joining the Independence Center, Patricia has been an integral part of modernizing and growing the Independence Center into the amazing center for independent living that you see today.
I'm Patricia Yeager, CEO of the Independence Center. I've been here, this is actually my 10th year of being here and working with the great staff and the people at the Independence Center and in our community, those that have disabilities. So I've been in this field, I've been in this movement for over 40 years, and I have met most all of the people who have played a role, in large or small, in the movement. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the disability civil rights movement. It started in the 40s, but really it became a modern thing in the late 70s and in the 80s, and has grown ever since. So the whole notion here is that people with disabilities can participate. It's not their disability that's a problem, it's the environment and the attitudes. And that systemic setup, which I'm going to talk about, is what kept us from participating. And if you were around in the 70s, you know you didn't see people with disabilities on the street. Now you see them all over the place. You see us all over the place because the environment has changed. So one of the things we had to do, and it took probably, 10 or 15 years, starting in 1980, we had to develop building codes. And we got those accessible building codes into the International Building Code, which most cities and counties and states have some version of that. And once we started doing that, buildings began to be built in an accessible manner, and we could get in. Buildings prior to that, and even some today, were built that kept us out. Not intentionally, I'd like to believe, but it did keep us out. So we dismantled that system by creating a building code that is now used around the country. That's one of the first things. We had to be able to get out and get into a building and use the bathroom, all those kinds of things before we could move on to transportation. So transportation, for many years, everybody said, well, if you can't walk up the steps, you can't get on. And the Reverend Wade Blank, who resided in Denver, worked in Denver, he started an organization called ADAPT, and they spent literally 10 years focused on the issue of transportation. So in the 80s, there was a contest of sorts going on between Seattle and Denver. And Denver's RTD board said, well, there's no such thing as lifts, and we can't develop them. Well, Seattle did. And so once we could show that Seattle had a prototype of lifts that could go on buses, Denver's RTD really didn't have a leg to stand on. There were a lot of demonstrations all over the country, but the main happening here, the main fight, if you will, with public policymakers was happening in Seattle and Denver, and then it rippled out. So in 1986-87, I was working for Mayor Pena at the time, the director of the Commission on People with Disabilities. And I was at an RTD meeting where Wade got up and began to talk about the need for wheelchairs, wheelchair accessible transportation, which we've been over this all over and over again with the RTD board. And one of the board members said, well, how many people are there in the Denver area that use wheelchairs? And without missing a beat, Wade said clearly, there are 15,000 people with disabilities who use wheelchairs in the metropolitan area. And I thought, wow, I didn't know that. The press quoted it. I put that figure in a couple of then Mayor Pena's speeches. And a little while later, I ran into Wade and I said, Wade, where'd you get that number? And he said, I made it up. I made it up. and it worked. It's, when I tell this story, people laugh here, and I'm hoping all of you are having a good laugh about it. Because back in those days, we could use anecdotes, we could tell stories, we could even sort of make things up. And because we weren't at that time very visible in the community, when we all showed up, everybody paid attention. And they wanted to work with us, so there wasn't this focus on data and numbers as there is today, mainly because people didn't collect data about people with disabilities. So we didn't really have much data at all. RTD went ahead and put the lifts on, and from that, the communities around the country began to put lifts on their buses. At one, when the ADA was signed, they couldn't buy buses very well without lifts. They had to buy them with lifts. And we went from the buses to the railroad, to the trains, to Greyhound bus, which was a fight all on its own, to the hotel shuttles, where we fought for having lifts on all of those travel conveyances so that people with disabilities could get around their community and between communities. But it took fully 10 years of advocating around the country for that change to happen. So once we began to be able to get in the buildings, be able to get a ride somewhere, we began to talk about employment. And employment, there's a lot of attitudes that had to change, but that was only going to happen if you met someone and got to know them who had a disability. And now that was starting to happen. But unfortunately, Social Security put up a big barrier on this. So in the old days, Social Security was absolutely for people who could not work at all. And we had people who could work, but not lose their health care. So when you get Social Security, you get Medicaid that also provides in-home support services. And if you are in a wheelchair, if you can't dress yourself or feed yourself, you need that support in your home. So people who need that are not going to go to work for fear they're going to lose their benefits. So Dr. Paul Longmore came along. Paul was a professor of history at San Francisco State University. One of the funniest men I've ever met. Sharp wit, really bright, intelligent, wrote a lot of books. His first book was on George Washington, and was very proud of his book, got ready to release it. And because he was on Social Security, he needed his in-home support services. His disability was polio. His hands and his arms did not work at all. So he couldn't dress himself very well. All of those things that you and I do in the mornings when we get up. So if he had that assistance, he could go to work and have a life. So Medicaid was very important to him. When Social Security realized that he was about to release his book, they told him that he could not take the royalties from that book, that he would lose his benefits if he took his royalties. So Paul, given his humorous self, he called a press conference in front of the Los Angeles Social Security office. He called all the press in and told this story, and then he burned his book on the street in front of Social Security. It's a big deal, and Social Security was pretty embarrassed about it. So they began to work with the disability community to set up what we have now, which is a Medicaid buy-in program where people can go to work, and as they make more money, their cash benefits may go down, and then they have a share of cost for whatever health care that they need from Medicaid. You need to be making $60,000 or $70,000 at that time. And as a new adjunct professor, he couldn't make that. Most people couldn't make that in their first job. So Social Security began to wake up and say, we need to let people work who can work and make it a partnership. Living on $1,500 a month is just an incredible feat. So most people do need to work at some point in time to supplement that. And so Paul's book burning sort of led to Social Security waking up and saying, we need to do something different here. So those are three, and there are many, many things that we had to work, and we've had to work with them every step of the way. We've had to sue people because they wouldn't get open-minded about it, or they denied it was a problem, or it couldn't be fixed. That wasn't the case at all. But we had to take them on one by one. So building accessibility was the first thing, transportation, employment. We've taken on healthcare. We've taken on a number of areas where we have prevailed to say that if you fix this, our disability doesn't show. It doesn't interfere because the environment is now welcoming. And hopefully, as people get to know us, their attitudes are changing as well. And that really is the role of a civil rights movement, is to integrate people into the community.
ADA, Stories of Independence. Amelia Dahl, archaeologist.
Hi, my name is Amelia Dahl. My name sign is Amelia. I was born and raised in Maryland, and I moved to Colorado about 4 years ago. When I was growing up, I attended a deaf school, the Maryland School in Frederick. From the age of 2 or 3 till I graduated at 18, I earned my BA in archaeological history at Gallaudet University, and then in 2015 I earned a master's in archaeology from Texas State University. My parents are also deaf. I have one hearing brother. He's considered a coda, a child of deaf parents. So I feel like my entire life has been very deaf-centered. I've always felt very secure in my deaf identity. I feel like nothing was in my way in terms of accomplishing what I wanted to do. It was sort of innate that I was able to have those goals. My parents encouraged me to do everything and anything I wanted. They always told me, go out, be yourself. So growing up, I never really experienced those kind of barriers. But when it comes to access and opportunities, not necessarily there for me. When I look back, I see that I do realize that, I was exposed to museums and archaeology and art growing up all of my life, but I never had a chance to do volunteer work. I never went to museum day at camp or anything like that because it wasn't accessible at that time. There wasn't a lot of outreach opportunities either for the deaf community, between the deaf community and the hearing community. There was no outreach to really bridge the two communities together. So I feel like in that regard, I might have lacked that sort of collaboration and camaraderie between hearing and deaf communities. That's really my biggest issue, I felt like growing up. Now, when I was in graduate school, 2015, I entered into a hearing world. And I thought, wow, okay, it was a lot of work, a lot of, getting ASL interpreters, advocating for myself to make sure my voice was heard. In graduate school, in those classroom academic setting, there's lots of discussion, and everybody would be talking and really fast, and I would have to raise my hand and say, hey, hold on, you guys. Maybe one at a time. But again, hearing culture, everybody kind of chatting and conversing, takes a little bit of adjusting to do one at a time. So it was at a point where my classmates became very used to it in a graduate program of 2 years together. When I told them, you have to include me, and if you go too fast, I'm out of it. It was like an eye-opening experience for them. It took me time to realize and recognize that ignorance and what people don't know, they just don't know. It's not necessarily a bad thing, just ignorance because you don't know. How we're raised, how we think, our perspectives about the world. And I found that if I approached people and told them why I need these things, then people were very generous and eager to accommodate. I'm very comfortable expressing my needs, and I feel like that's key. Being upfront, and just addressing it in the first place. For me personally, I feel like it's important that people try to accommodate me. If not, then I lose out on that opportunity. They lose out on the opportunity as well. If they give me the opportunity to, be involved in a workplace or whatever, I feel like, that's what has influenced me today. My upbringing was a very strong identity, and I always felt confident in that. But as an adult, I realized I needed to accommodate hearing culture somewhat as well. So I feel like I had in my upbringing a life half and half that brought me here. It's been an interesting experience. So when I was at Gallaudet, I realized they just didn't have archaeology degrees or fields of study. So I started to think about ways I could match archaeology with the field of study I was in my BA. I felt like I needed more experience. I needed to be in the archaeology field, and I wasn't sure how to do that. So after researching, I found an archaeology field school in Belize, worked with Gallaudet to see if there was any way they could pay for me to do that. It was in my senior year of college. They did help me work it out, and I was able to go to Belize. It was a beautiful opportunity. But one mistake that I made, without really thinking about it, I thought, I can do this without an ASL interpreter. And then I realized that was absolutely not true. Definitely needed an ASL interpreter. It was a big mistake. I thought it was going to be no big deal with lectures, and it was just going to be working out in the field. But actually, there were lectures, there were workshops, gatherings, nighttime study groups, getting to know each other. And that's when I realized I really need an ASL interpreter. Luckily, I was roommates with a person who knew ASL. I was very fortunate. And that's why now I'm very adamant about having ASL interpreters and advocating for that, because I want access to everything, period. And I was, at that time, accepted to Texas State, and I earned my master's in archaeology. And I do have to add that I added another field of GIS. And I noticed in that field, there were more tools that I could put in my own toolbox for moving forward in my profession. More opportunities, more networking, more people recognize and know my name in the field, and I started to notice that. I know that there are different professionals in the field that have different skill sets, and I'm a part of that now. So collection management and GIS in archaeology is my fascination and my love, and it's been ever since. And I just love it. And also feel that it's part of my deaf identity, because when I do research about deaf people and deaf civilizations long ago, Native American, there's not a lot of records or information about deaf people from way back when. And I think obviously it was impossible because deaf people, they say there's nothing because deaf people didn't exist. And I'm like, please, there has to be information. I understand that it's maybe hard and it is rare to find that information, but it's out there. So I think that's something that's really lacking. And I feel like as I pursue my career moving forward as a deaf person and an archaeologist, I feel that I have that obligation to work hard and find history of my deaf people over, periods of time, documenting it and recording it. And I feel like that's how my life has sort of interplayed. Everything that I've experienced has brought me here, and that archaeology has been a part of my life ever since I was small. When I was in graduate school, taking classes, attending lectures, meeting teachers, interacting with interpreters, they would fingerspell all these archaeological terms, and it wasn't really fluid in ASL. You kind of have to stop to wait. Okay, hold on, let me fingerspell that term. Let me fingerspell that term. As a deaf person receiving that information, bothered me, and it felt like an intrusion in my education. Myself, I already knew that word and what it was, but the interpreters were like, okay, let me make sure I'm spelling that right. You know, that's an interpreter's job, accuracy in the communication. It just extended my processes in terms of learning. You know, like, come on, I want to learn this. Let's hurry up. So I decided at that point to start to think of signs from 2015 to 2017. I started to think about different signs for archaeological terms. And then after I graduated, I met people, worked with people, networked with people. And we talked often about how there were no ASL signs for archaeological words. So like radio, carbon, dating, let's make that RDC instead of finger spelling it out. Radio, carbon, all that, just elongated everything. Also out in the field, like for example, you do people there are archaeologists who work in a lab and archaeologists who work out in the field. And people who work out in the field do surveys. And when they do a survey, they have to line like a sensor line, it's called, or a sensory line, where you do 20 millimeters in between people lined up. And how do you communicate as archaeologists out in the field when you're doing a survey? Generally, they held walkie-talkies and communicated to each other that way. When I was on the team, I was like, how's that going to work? They'd been doing it that way forever. So I'd wave my hands, and then I realized that's not going to work. It's no good. I just have to teach other people signs, and then we can all do it. It's not that hard. Hey, yes, just sign it, and then we can all see it. So I would teach my colleagues things like the letter S for stop, and then feature, like if someone sees a feature, they can sign it a certain way, and then everybody in the line knows to wait. You know, if you say sight, I taught them how to sign that. It means you have to go and leave the line and help look for objects at a particular site. So there were ways the ASL could communicate things more clearly, making it not necessary to need a walkie-talkie. Everything just worked out really well with teaching and educating my peers. It really helped in the field. And so far for me, I feel like I've made an impact. For me, the word independence means support. I realized that a lot of my independence really came from my support system. I have an amazing support system, starting with my parents. They are deaf as well. They both had great jobs. My dad worked for the FDA. My mom worked for the IRS. So it was like both of my parents really encouraged me. There's nothing to stop you. You can do whatever you want. What's important, I always felt like, was that support. My brother supported me a lot. With my current project, my brother gave me great advice and offered me his assistance. And I feel I'm very independent because I've had that support in my foundation. If I'm feeling lost or unsure, I can always rely on that support system. I feel like that's really key. Yes, my family and my parents are a support, but also the environment where you live is a support system. When I was in graduate school, there was a Dr. Alman, was the director of archaeology, the Archaeology Center at Texas State University. And he was very encouraging and, taught me about GIS. And he was willing to share his time and knowledge with me about the GIS system. He didn't have to do that. It wasn't a part of his job. I was just working as a graduate assistant at the time. Not really under his tutelage, but he was very supportive of me and encouraged me. And I had that for 2 years in my graduate program. So teachers, professors, my old bosses, my colleagues, supervisors, people I still keep in touch with, my old supervisors, I keep in touch with people I knew in my graduate program. And so independence as a vision, I think, comes from a really strong support system.
Jeremy Chatelain, Board Member, the Independence Center.
My name is Jeremy Chatelain. I grew up, to provide my history, I grew up in Utah, had just a normal childhood, enjoyed playing with my siblings. There's 5 of us, all about the outdoors, from ATVs to being on bikes as little kids. I joined the Air Force my senior year and had a chance to fly around the world with them, working on the air refueling tankers. So I'm a proud veteran of the United States Air Force and miss the airplanes. I also served as a missionary for my church in the Philippines, and so I got to live abroad for 2 full years, learning the language and getting to experience the culture and people of a foreign country, and absolutely loved my time there. In fact, my wife also chose to serve as a missionary for our church and served in Guatemala. We were attending school in Ogden, Utah, and were transferred to Blackfoot, Idaho. Just a little farming community. We drove up there and found a house quickly and just were excited to start our new life. New degree, new marriage, new home, new job. Well, just as we were moving up there, literally with our car packed, we took a detour to attend a family reunion. And while we were there, just outside of Boise, Idaho, we did what we'd done ever since we were little children. We'd float down the Payette River on black inner tubes, literally the tire tubes out of my grandpa's tractor. A couple hours later, we would get out where there was a bridge that went over across just from one side of town to the other. Not very high, maybe 15 feet off the ground, so maybe a high dive, if that much. And while we waited for Grandpa to come get us in a pickup truck, my brothers and sister and I would jump off the bridge. We'd been diving off that bridge 15 years and would never have thought a second time about it. The river that year was high. It was a flood year, and all we can figure is that the flood had pushed down the rocks and gravel and filled in the swimming hole that we'd been jumping into. And Connie hit the bottom and thought that was strange because we never talked about that in any of our stories. And I came up to try to tell us that it was shallow. But by then I was already in the air and I don't remember her coming up. We found out later that the river was only 6 feet deep and I am just over 6 feet tall. When I hit my head on the bottom, it forced my chin into my chest with such force. It chipped a few of my teeth, it split my head open in 2 places, and then it broke my neck. The spinal cord, they call it a burst fracture. And when the bone was pushed into my spinal cord, that's what paralyzed me. As I pondered the question, the barriers that I face, sadly and bluntly to put it, are people and attitudes. And I don't mean that critically. I grew up without a disability, and I don't know that I would have thought anything about it if I had seen a person in a wheelchair. I don't know what I would have said or how to approach someone. I think that I was a kind person who would have opened doors or asked someone what I could do to help. But the opposite is true. It's just difficult. One little example, when we were living in Idaho, we ordered pizza for dinner one night, and I drove over to Pizza Hut, and they had one designated handicap spot that fortunately was van accessible. And as I pulled in, there was already a vehicle in it. I thought, okay, I'll wait. But of course I looked for the handicap placard or the license plate and it wasn't there. And as I waited, and this happens all the time, everywhere I go, parking is always on my mind. I never park anywhere without consciously looking, is somebody going to block me in? Are they going to prevent me from getting in and out of my van? And so I waited. I want to show people that, hey, I do need these spots. Sure enough, a woman came out with pizzas in her arms, and I was sitting there in my wheelchair. And I said, this is a handicap spot. And she goes, oh, I didn't think people actually used these. But the barriers are just, I guess, people not thinking about accessibility. I'm amazed in just community design how often I get to the end of the sidewalk and there's no curb cut. Even at the hospital in my rehab, I get to the end of a nice walk and here's a flight of stairs with no way around it, having to go back and traverse or in intersections. So barriers sometimes can be physical with a wheelchair. Other times it can just be attitudes of other people. What has helped me overcome those barriers, though, I'm glad to say, are also people. It's sitting in the grocery store looking up at the raspberry Pop-Tarts for my son. We can't reach them, and I don't know why they always put them on the top shelf, but somebody will come along and just ask, can I reach that for you? It's difficult. Every day is a day of what barriers am I going to face, but then every day too, I'm just encouraged by how good people are, that they help me overcome barriers as well. What independence means to me is a fascinating question, a very interesting study. I think, again, as with barriers, it's as much a state of mind as it is a physical condition. What independence means to me is that I don't get somewhere and then have to stop and watch my family go on without me, which really is just a daily, a weekly struggle, getting as far as I can and then having to just watch my family in the distance. Independence is being able to go past whatever that barrier was into wherever they're at. Independence is being able to have a home built with universal design on the way up, where there's no stairs into the front door where I even need a great big ramp. It just rolls into the house. The same with the garage. Independence is being able to reach light switches that have been placed where I'm at, rather than trying to get an arm without triceps up as high as that. Independence is being able to attend a symphony concert and not be an afterthought, just pushed in the corner of a building, not able to be with my family. So independence is a state of mind, but it is also a physical aspect. For years, as we've taken this wheelchair places that it really can't go, but just not being satisfied to sit and watch my family. This spring, I was able to attend an online abilities expo that typically is held in person in Boston, actually, where I wouldn't have been able to go. But because of the pandemic, each vendor did their own website. And so on a Saturday, I was flipping through them just to see what new technology was out. And I saw one wheelchair that they claimed was more off-road, but it was a Segway style wheelchair where it required one to be able to balance, which as a quadriplegic, I can't. I don't have trunk muscles. And so I bookmarked and I thought, wouldn't it be great if finally they really had one that a quadriplegic can use? And sure enough, I turned the page and there was an all-terrain wheelchair called the Terrain Hopper. It's a gentleman who has a disability that retired from his profession and noticed in England they were building these wheelchairs that were able to go on beaches, which was something that he wanted to be able to do. Power wheelchair is so heavy, I can't go on sand or at the ocean again. It's a time where I sit in the parking lot and see my family playing in the ocean. We went to England, purchased one, had it sent over, and realized, why is this not in the United States? It's the freedom that it brings, the independence. And so he arranged to purchase the license to build them here. So it's a relatively new company in Tempe, Arizona, and they build these terrain hoppers. It's a four-wheel, independent suspension, independent motors. It's an electric wheelchair classification, but it can go off-road. And it is amazing. The freedoms that I have, the independence is incredible. It can climb up curbs, so no more having to try to find a curb cut. It can go over logs that are placed on trails to prevent erosion or railroad ties. It can climb those. Any of the rocks, any of the little things that would stop this wheelchair, even though behind it there were no more obstacles, the terrain hopper can go over and get to it. So another way that what independence means to me was a few years, or maybe a year after my spinal cord injury, my wife and I moved up to Idaho, and I was in need of a new doctor, a new physiatrist that can just handle my spinal cord injury. As we located one, I'd never heard of him before. I didn't know who he was. We rolled into his office, and he paused for a minute and kind of looked me up and down. Connie was sitting next to me. And the very first thing he said to me was, "I'm glad your wheelchair is dirty." And I immediately looked at Connie because it is her personality to make sure my wheelchair is always clean. I teach in front of students. I've been a student for years in graduate school. I'm a professional. She spends time detailing my chair all the time to clean off the dirt that we do get in the wheelchair. wondering if she was offended, and then he explained what he meant. He said that he gets worried when he sees patients come in a wheelchair that they've had 3 or 4 years, and it is still brand new. It's obvious that they're not out in the community. They're not out rolling around doing things in the chair. And he says, I can tell because your wheelchair is dirty. Again, quick look at my wife. He says that you're going to be all right. He says, I can tell that you're living life, that you're experiencing things. You'll be healthier because you're not just sitting around waiting, that you're engaging, that you're being productive, you're living life. And so what independence means to me in a lot of ways is my wheelchair is dirty. And I am grateful for people that help me overcome the barriers, that help us as a family get my wheelchair dirty so that we can experience life.
Stephanie Simonette, writer, advocate.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Simonette. I am from Colorado Springs. I am a Coloradoan. So after, I played varsity volleyball in high school, and I was able to get a 4-year scholarship to Howard University. So I was very blessed to be able to attend college there from playing volleyball. So I graduated in 97, and I worked as a dental assistant because I always wanted to be a dentist, but that path didn't actually work out for me. I have traumatic brain injury, other words known as a TBI, and I got diagnosed with that in 2015, although I know I had it way before that. I have been in substantial car accidents. My sophomore year in college, I was walking across the street and got hit by a car. And I guess the person thought that they were putting on the brakes, but they put on the accelerator, and then they slammed on the brakes. So that was one. But the thing is unless you're bleeding from the head, or, the doctors they don't really do a thorough examination, and I feel like every accident that I've been in, now that I know what I know about TBIs, I don't really feel like I got a really good thorough examination. So that was my sophomore year in college. And in 2003, I was in New York, in Brooklyn with some of my friends for Memorial Day. And we were on our way back, and we were at a stoplight and got slammed in the back by a New York City transit bus. So fortunately, I had my seatbelt on. But if I had not, I think it would have been definitely a lot worse. The girl who was behind me, one of my friends who was behind me, she did not have her seatbelt on. So she slammed up against the back of I was in the right passenger side, and she slammed up against the back of my chair. So I'm flying forward, and then I fly back. And so, but then there's a force flying against my chair. So that was very detrimental to my brain, my body and my brain. Unfortunately, like I said, it could have been a lot worse, but we were saved in that accident. So I'm definitely blessed with that. I was able to, in 2015, I was able to go to the Amen Clinic, which was in Virginia. And they did a very thorough assessment, and they could even see past traumas. Because when I was in about 7th grade, I was in middle school, and I was walking to school, and I slipped on ice and fell back, and it landed right on the back of my head. But back then, it wasn't really talked about, so it was just a matter of take 2 aspirin, take a bed, go to bed, and call it a day. But I think that's when a lot of my memory and focus and a lot of those started to show up. But it was just a matter of you're not paying attention, or you need to study a little harder. It was never attributed to falling back because I didn't really speak on that. Even though I lost a patch of hair in the back of my head from that my short and my long-term memory has been affected. My prefrontal cortex was damaged in some of the accidents, and so that affects my memory because that's considered like the executive function of the brain. So anything dealing with organization, memory retention, it did a lot also to my mental state. It kind of changed. My anxiety level was plummeted sky high. PTSD just from the accidents, but a lot of it was more memory, having to take medication that I had never really been on before, experiencing just so much pain, headaches, pain that runs from my neck down to my arm, my back. So chronic pain is like chronic pain, the memory, the organization, the mood imbalances. So, there's quite a bit that goes on with the TBI. When you look at me, you don't see traumatic brain injury. You don't see TBI. You don't see memory loss. You don't see confusion. You just see someone who just looks quote unquote normal, but what is normal? And sometimes I think, like, if I had something visible that people could identify, okay, well, she has a bandage wrapped around her head. We know that she has something wrong with her head. But because I don't have any signs, visual, right, immediate signs that I have traumatic brain injury, I do get judged quite a bit because I think people expect so much more than sometimes I'm able to give, especially if I'm overwhelmed. The judgment, the preconceived notions that everything is just fine, that, people just assume. There's a lot of assumptions. And most times I have to kind of wrap myself out and say, and I really don't necessarily like to disclose that I have a traumatic brain injury, but there's a lot of times where I have to, because people just don't understand why I'm maybe not going as fast as someone else, or why I'm not grasping concepts. And I've lost jobs because, like, as an administrative assistant, there's a lot of multitasking. Even answering the phones, by the time they say who their name is, I would have forgotten their name. I don't have paper to write it down. And if I write it down, it's wrong. So there's a lot of different jobs that I've had where I didn't disclose that I had a TBI. But, a lot of people knew, there's something just not quite right. We don't know, how to put our finger on it. But I've definitely become more comfortable with letting people know, if necessary, that I have a traumatic brain injury. And most times, people will be understanding, but a lot of times they're not, because they don't see anything. So my writing in a way for me is a form of independence, because I can remember when I was not able to write my thoughts and my feelings down. And sometimes that was because either I was hospitalized, or, they only give you like a little pen, a little pad or something. So for me to be able to verbalize myself either on my computer or whether I'm just writing, then it's a very freeing experience for me. It's taken us, those of us with disabilities, has been able to take us to levels that we probably would not have been able to, in the progress that we've been able to make because of the ADA and the hard work that has been done just, for us to be able to have some of the basic rights as other individuals. And so I'd like to say, don't look at me as having a disability or having a traumatic brain injury, because I'm not a traumatic brain injury. You know, I am a person, I'm a woman, I'm an African American, and I think that's really important too. I think that's one of my missions in life is to be able to continue advocating for myself so that I can continue to advocate for others, even if it's in the smallest way. It doesn't have to be anything grand or anything. It could just be something as saying hi to someone, to acknowledge that, you know, you might be in a wheelchair, you might have crutches, you know, whatever. Just say hi. You know, they're a person just like I'm a person, just like you're a person. Someone without a disability, someone with a disability. We all bleed red at the end of the day, you know, so finding commonalities opposed to finding differences, I think is really important. Independence means, to me, is being able to advocate for myself, being able to, and that's taken a while. It's taken a while to do, to know that I had that right and that choice to advocate for myself. And that was so freeing and liberating to know that if I speak up for either needs that I have or needs that I feel like aren't being met, then I have that choice and I have that right. And that in a great way allows me to have more independence, being able to advocate not only for myself, but I've been able to advocate for others as well. So a lot of people don't know when they are at college, they don't realize that most schools should have a disability center that they can go to and get the services that they need. So I was able to, while I was working on my master's, I was able to utilize the disability services. So I had longer testing time. I could test in a room by myself. I was able to record lectures. So there were a lot of great benefits that I was able to utilize because I advocated and because I searched those things out in order to help me be the best version of myself that I could be. And I think that has given me a lot of independence. Going to the Independence Center, having that support group, and I think that's one important thing of being an advocate for yourself or for someone else is to have a support network. So I know going to the Independence Center, going to their TBI support group has been amazing to know that, and the whole concept is to know that you're not alone. You know, we're still having to advocate for ourselves to get some of the basic necessities that other people have that those with disabilities don't have. So I think it's always going to be a continuous process. Yes, we've come a long ways, but yes, we still have a long ways to go. So being able to advocate for myself and someone who doesn't or can't advocate for themselves, I think that's really important.
Many thanks to everyone who tuned in today to support the 31st anniversary of the passage of the ADA. I'm honored that I could be part of this celebration this year, and I hope to see everyone in person at next year's event. Thank you once again for joining us today.
Thank you for attending ADA Celebrating Independence.